Do you really think God can tell you no? Think about it for a second before you answer, because the answer completely changes the way you ask. And the way you ask ends up defining what you receive. Most people pray like someone buying a lottery ticket. Hopefully, if it's your will, when the time comes. And interestingly, they end up getting results just as unpredictable as a lottery. But in 1913, a book appeared that proposed a completely different way of asking. So direct, so bold, that even today it still makes many people uncomfortable. Its message was clear. Don't beg God. Claim what is already yours. Because according to this teaching, there is something that God cannot do, even if He wanted to. Deny you what He already gave you from the beginning. And the person who wrote that book was not some self-styled guru, nor a figure who came out of nowhere. She was a school teacher who regained her hearing without resorting to medication. A woman who went on to sign the ordination certificate of one of the most influential names in modern spirituality. She founded spiritual centers from California to Canada, traveled the world teaching, and yet history ultimately left her to gather dust. Give it a try. Go into a bookstore and ask for her. Most likely no one will know who she was. Her name was Annie Ricks Millitz. And in her book about prosperity, she wrote down an affirmation so powerful that today we're going to recover it exactly, just as she formulated it more than 100 years ago. This is not just another video. It's the reopening of a forgotten file. The file of a woman who was almost erased from history, and of a teaching they couldn't make disappear either. Let's open that file piece by piece. And when we get to the end, that statement will be on your own lips. But no important file is opened with cold hands. Before we examine the first piece of evidence, I'd like to suggest something. All this teaching revolves around a very simple idea. Wealth is not begged for, it is received and then put into motion. So write right now in the comments the short version of the affirmation that you are going to make your own today. Abundance flows to me and is expressed through me. Write it down. Write it out completely. Not just to me, also through me, because those two parts are inseparable. And when you discover the full sentence, you'll understand that it's precisely that second half that opens the real door. All right, first piece of evidence in the file, California, year 1887. A school teacher from San Francisco, born in 1856, walks toward a modest rented hall. There, a woman who came from Chicago is giving some rather unusual lectures for the time. She discusses the spirit's power. She talks about the mind. She talks about a reality that almost no one dares to bring up. The teacher's name is Annie Ricks Millitz, and she carries two constant companions who never leave her. Unbearable migraines and deafness in one of her ears. Imagine for a moment living her life. You are a teacher in one of the busiest cities in the American West. Your routine is a mix of blackboards, notebooks, and a salary that barely gets you by. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is a body that seems determined to set limits for you. Headaches that come back again and again, like that friend who never gets the hint. And an ear that turns every conversation into a puzzle. He had tried everything that medicine had to offer at that time, and none of it worked. The woman who leads those classes is named Emma Curtis Hopkins. Over the years, she would become known by a nickname that perfectly sums up who she was: the teacher of teachers. Many of the future founders of the main spiritual movements in the United States would learn from her teachings. But what Emma taught was not the typical Sunday religion. Her message was much more radical. She claimed that God was the only true reality, and that when the mind deeply understood that truth, illness would vanish, just like a shadow disappears when you turn on a light. Annie listens. and something changes inside her. During those classes, an event occurs that the chronicles recount matter-of-factly. The migraines disappear, and the ear that hadn't responded for years starts hearing again. Stop for a moment and think about what that meant for her. She didn't read someone else's testimony. She herself was the testimony. They didn't tell her that miracles existed. She literally heard them with an ear that had been silent for years. That explains something you'll notice on every page she wrote afterward. Annie Riggs Millitz never taught secondhand theories. Everything she shared, she had first put to the test in her own life, in her own body, in her own home, in her own pocket. That's why her books don't sound like a philosophical treatise. They sound like advice from someone who's already crossed the bridge and came back only to show you the way. That same year, he made a decision that would change his destiny. She left her job as a teacher, and together with her sister Harriet, she opened a small center in San Francisco to teach and practice what she had discovered. Over time, that place on Pine Street stopped being just a simple center. It became the heart of an entire movement. At first, it had another name, but it would end up being known as Home of Truth. The Home of Truth. And look at the symbolism, because this case file is full of coincidences that seem too precise to be just chance. A woman who, for years, could only hear half the world ended up creating entire homes dedicated to helping others learn to listen to the truth. Second piece of evidence. And personally, this is one of the most revealing ones, because it has been hidden in plain sight for more than a century. There is a document dated December 1st, 1890. That strange person didn't seem to come from this world. Elventure, who together with his wife Myrtle would found Unity, one of the most influential spiritual movements in history, and a source of inspiration for entire generations of prosperity teachers. That certificate has two signatures. The first one belongs to Emma Curtis Hopkins. The second one belongs to Annie Riggs Millitz. Think about it for a moment. The woman whose name almost no one remembers, was the one who signed the ordination of the founder of Unity. That means she wasn't just another student in the audience. She was at the core where one of the most important spiritual movements of her time began to take shape. In 1891, her own ordination took place. Shortly after, she married Paul Millitz, and from then on she would sign with the name by which she would go down in history, Annie Riggs Millitz. When she builds her career piece by piece, the result is impressive. For years, she wrote the Bible lessons for Unity magazine, educating thousands of readers. She also taught classes at the Kansas City headquarters. In 1893, during the Chicago World's Fair, she met Swami Vivekananda, the man who introduced Hinduism to the West. That encounter further broadened her spiritual vision and reinforced her idea that truth could be found in different traditions. Over time, she founded Home of Truth centers all along the West Coast, from San Diego to British Columbia. In 1911, she launched her own magazine, Mastermind. Later, she established a University of Christ in Los Angeles, presided over the New Thought Alliance, and during the 1915 International Exposition, she officially organized New Thought Day. She traveled to different countries teaching an idea that, for many, was almost a provocation, that a mind aligned with God can heal the body and completely transform one's life. And don't forget the context. We're talking about a woman who was doing all this at a time when, in much of the country, women didn't even have the right to vote. While many barely even allowed women to voice an opinion, she was teaching, founding institutions, publishing books, crossing continents alone, and proclaiming that God wanted to see his children prosper. Pause for a moment and imagine that scene. because from the comfort of the 21st century, it's easy to forget the price of challenging established ideas. In many pulpits of her time, it was preached that poverty was almost a badge of spiritual merit, that suffering was synonymous with holiness, and that a woman should remain silent within the congregation. But Annie Rix Millitz would step onto stages filled with people to say exactly the opposite, that misery was not a virtue, that sickness did not represent God's will, and that any child of God, man or woman, had the right to fully claim their inheritance, here and now. Each lecture was a small revolution, wearing a hat and gloves. You start to understand why her message made so many people uncomfortable. We haven't reached the most interesting part yet. Let's open the book now. In 1913, he published his work dedicated to prosperity. The original title left no room for doubt. Prosperity through the knowledge and power of mind. That is, prosperity through the knowledge and power of the mind. Over the years, new editions would adopt another name, both riches and honor, riches and also honor. That title wasn't chosen for marketing reasons. It comes directly from the Bible. From you come riches and honor. Yours are power and strength. You have the power to uplift and strengthen everyone. It's important to remember this detail because later you'll understand why. His book about money begins precisely by relying on the scriptures, and from the very first pages, he launches a frontal attack against one of the most deeply rooted beliefs in history. The idea that being poor automatically makes you holier. For centuries, it was taught that misery brought you closer to God, that giving up everything was the right path, and that money by itself was suspicious. Millitz responded with a phrase that, in 1913, must have landed like a thunderbolt. Listen to it carefully. It is the will of the true God that you be a great success on earth as well as in heaven. It doesn't say God allows it occasionally. It doesn't say that it's a reward reserved for a few lucky ones. It says that this is His will, that you prosper here, in this life, in this world, not only when everything is over. And then it introduces an idea that is still puzzling even today. It states that the laws of spiritual prosperity work in exactly the opposite way from the rules of the world. He wrote, "The laws of spiritual prosperity are exactly the opposite of the laws of material prosperity. While the world says save in case hard times come, the divine economy responds, share. While the world insists on accumulating, the divine economy speaks of keeping it in circulation. While fear whispers, hold on to what you have, she replies, bless what you give. Yes, completely the other way around. Because according to Millitz, a closed fist not only prevents you from giving, it also prevents you from receiving. And in case anyone thought she was only talking about easy money, fleeting wealth, or strokes of luck, she made something very clear. The riches that come from truth are permanent, and they never come alone. They bring with them health, healthier relationships, peace of mind, inner growth, and of course material prosperity as well. Because for her, abundance wasn't a bank account, it was a complete state of being. Remember these two words, divine economy, because the statement you have come to discover only makes sense within that logic. But first you need to understand the principle that supports the whole structure. The heart of Annie Rix Millitz's teaching can be summed up in a single affirmation. God the good is all in all. He is the only presence, the only power, and the only intelligence. And if that is true, then sickness, poverty, evil, and even death do not possess a definitive reality. They are shadows that the mind ends up confusing with something permanent. Now come with me, because here is the key to everything. If God is all in all, abundance can't be a limited resource that God keeps somewhere to distribute according to his mood. No, abundance is part of what God is. It's just like the sun. The sun doesn't have a warehouse full of light. The sun is light. And now tell me this. Can the sun choose not to shine on those under the sky today? It can't. Not because it lacks power, but because shining is part of its very nature. The only thing that can keep the light from reaching you is what you yourself put between it and your body. A wall, a blind, a windowless basement. The same thing, said Millitz, happens with abundance. God cannot deny it to you because he would have to stop being who he is to do so. He would have to deny himself. Scarcity was never a decision made by heaven. It was a closed blind in the mind of the person asking. And here comes the decisive question. What keeps that blind closed? The way you ask. I want you to notice the difference because once you discover it, you can't stop seeing it. Imagine two people praying tonight for money. The first one puts their hands together and says, Lord, you know how much I need it. If it is your will, send me something. Anything, even just a little. I beg you. It sounds humble. It even seems like an exemplary prayer. But listen to what he's really claiming, even if he doesn't say it in words. Abundance is far away. It doesn't belong to me. Maybe I don't deserve it. And maybe God wants me to keep living in scarcity. Every please reinforces a state of lack. When he finishes praying, he gets up with less inner abundance than when he started. Now observe the second person. He closes his eyes and he declares, Father, thank you that your will is my prosperity. Now comes the practical part. Because Annie Ricks Millitz was more of a teacher than a mystic, and you can see that on every page she wrote. Her books aren't made to inspire you for just 5 minutes. They're meant for you to put them into practice. For the next 7 days, you're going to do this exercise. First, choose 2 moments, when you wake up and right before you go to sleep. These are the moments when the mind is most receptive. Find a few minutes of silence. Take 3 slow breaths and focus completely. Then start with the inner cleansing. Repeat slowly. No anger can undermine me. No envy can corrode my affairs. No selfishness can rust me. No greed can overburden me. But don't recite it out of habit. As you say each phrase, truly let go of what it represents. Forgive that argument you're still carrying. Stop comparing yourself to others, and stop being afraid to lose. Before opening the flow, you have to clean the channel. Then comes the most important part. Declare calmly, I am God's free instrument for distribution. Riches flow to me and through me to bless the whole world. Here's the detail that changes everything. Don't say it like you're expecting a miracle. Say it like someone who is signing a receipt for something that already belongs to him. The phrase isn't trying to convince God. It's trying to remind you who you are. But the exercise doesn't end when you open your eyes. During the day, act according to that declaration. Share something intentionally. Leave a tip. Help someone. Give away an item you no longer use. Share some knowledge without expecting anything in return. The size of the gesture doesn't matter. What matters is showing your mind that the channel is still open. Because someone who says at night, wealth flows through me, but during the day clings to everything out of fear of losing it, is contradicting himself. And your deeper mind will always believe your actions more than your words. Follow this process for 7 days in a row. No rush, no anxiety, and without expecting immediate results. Your job is not to chase abundance. It's to become someone capable of letting it flow. According to Millitz, when the channel remains open, the flow eventually comes on its own. In the afternoon, you see that someone else gets exactly what you wanted. Before, you would have felt envy. This time, you don't. You breathe and remember, envy cannot eat away at my affairs. And at night, before going to sleep, you do your last treatment of the day and rest with the peace of someone who has already taken possession of their inheritance. That's all. Maybe no one will notice any change on the outside, but on the inside, you will have kept the channel open all day. And an open channel, sooner or later, always ends up letting the water through. 7 days, 2 statements a day, a conscious act of circulation. That was the protocol of Annie Riggs Millitz. Now then, probably while you were listening to all this, some doubts came up. They're the same ones that her teaching raised more than a century ago. The first one is usually this: isn't it blasphemy to say something like that? Actually, no. Because the phrase never tries to give orders to God. It gives them to you. It asks you to let go of anger, envy, selfishness, and greed. It reminds you that you are an instrument, not the owner of wealth, and that everything you receive has a purpose: to bless others. What was truly uncomfortable was never the phrase. The uncomfortable part was questioning the idea that humility means expecting little from an infinite God. Millitz simply decided to take the word Father seriously. The second objection goes like this: and why do you claim that God can't deny it to me? Because according to Millitz, if God is the absolute good, denying abundance would go against his own nature. It's like the sun. It doesn't choose each morning whether to shine on you. It shines because that's what it is. In the same way, saying that God cannot deny you his abundance does not diminish his power. On the contrary, it presents him as a perfect, constant, and unchanging being. The third objection is usually much more personal. All that sounds good, but I'm deep in debt. Interestingly, Millitz also talked about that. And his advice was unexpected. Don't start by thinking about money. Start by regaining your honor. Keep your word, stop hiding. Face your commitments with dignity, and keep declaring the truth about your life. Because the debt belongs to a bank account, but honor belongs to the soul. And, according to her, the states of the soul always end up being reflected in the states of life. And now we come to the last page of this file. On June 22, 1924, Annie Riggs Millitz died in Los Angeles. She was 68 years old and still completely devoted to her work. But that was when the most unfair part of her story began. Her magazine disappeared. Many of the centers she had founded closed over time. The movements she helped to build grew until they became enormous. Meanwhile, her name was disappearing from books. The disciples were remembered. The teacher was forgotten. She was not silenced by persecutions or by courts. They did it in a much more effective way. They simply stopped mentioning her. Why did it happen? Probably for the same reasons as always. He didn't build a great institution dedicated to preserving his legacy. And besides, she was a woman, at a time that rarely gave prominence to women who changed history. But here comes the greatest irony of all. They managed to erase her name, not her ideas. Her teachings remained alive within the movements she helped create, in the books she inspired, and in the principles that others continued to teach for generations, many times without even knowing where they came from. Because a seed, once it has been sown, no longer belongs to the one who planted it. And look where we are today, more than 100 years later, on another continent, in another language. Remembering a phrase that seemed destined to disappear, tonight thousands of people will say again, "Riches flow to me and through me to bless the whole world." And somehow, the channel Annie opened more than a century ago will keep the flow going. Through her books, through this video, and now also through you. In the end, his own teaching turned out to be true. What enters the flow is never lost. They tried to erase his voice, and yet today he speaks again. Remember 3 ideas. The first one, you have just discovered a declaration written more than a century ago by a woman who defied all the rules of her time. The second one, abundance, according to Millitz, is not a reward that God grants to a few. It is a natural expression of who He is. And the third, prosperity begins when you cleanse your inner self, declare your true identity, and allow everything you receive to keep circulating. But above all, take this change of perspective with you. Maybe you came to this video asking like someone waiting for permission to come in. Now you know that the door was never closed, that the table was also set for you. The only real barrier was thinking you didn't have the right to sit at it. Every time you repeat this declaration, also remember the one who wrote it. A teacher who turned her pain into teaching. A woman whom time tried to erase and who, more than a century later, still finds new voices to carry her message. Because when you say these words, you're not just repeating an affirmation, you're continuing a story. The story of those who decided to stop begging and to live as heirs. Tonight, when you close your eyes, don't ask from a place of lack. Declare from certainty. Because according to Annie Ricks Millitz, abundance doesn't begin when the world changes. It begins when the place from which you claim it changes.